The pilot did not know what was flying beside him until it was already too late to do anything about it. He was cruising at altitude over the Persian Gulf, a region that has seen more close calls, more near misses, and more silent standoffs between military aircraft than almost anywhere else on Earth. His radar had not picked it up. His ground control had not warned him. One moment the sky was empty. The next moment there was an F-22 Raptor sitting off his wing, close enough to read the markings, close enough to see the helmet of the American pilot turning slowly to look directly at him. No weapons were fired, no shots were taken. But what happened in the minutes that followed sent a message that military analysts are still talking about today. A message not written in words but delivered through presence, through positioning, and through the sheer terrifying capability of the most advanced fighter jet ever built by human hands. This is the story of what really happens when an F-22 intercepts an Iranian fighter over the Persian Gulf. The tactics, the technology, the chain of command, the rules of engagement, and the moments that never make it onto the evening news but shape the balance of power in one of the most dangerous stretches of airspace on the planet. If you want to understand how air dominance actually works in the real world, not in a video game, not in a movie, but in the skies where decisions happen in seconds and mistakes have consequences that echo for decades, then stay with this one all the way through. Because what you are about to learn will change the way you think about American air power forever. Before we go any further, take a second to subscribe. Over 98% of people who watch these videos never subscribe. It costs you nothing and it means everything. Hit that button now so you never miss a story like this one. Let us start at the beginning. Let us start with the geography because geography is everything in this story. The Persian Gulf is a body of water roughly 600 miles long and 200 miles wide. It is bordered by Iran to the north and east, and by a string of Arab nations including the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia to the south and west. At its narrowest point, the Strait of Hormuz, it is only about 21 miles wide, and through that strait passes roughly 20% of the world's entire oil supply every single day. That fact alone makes the Persian Gulf one of the most strategically important pieces of ocean on the planet. Whoever controls the airspace above that water controls the flow of energy to the global economy, and both the United States and Iran understand that perfectly. The United States has maintained a near-constant military presence in and around the Persian Gulf since the late 1980s. Aircraft carriers transit through regularly. The Fifth Fleet is headquartered in Bahrain. American air assets are based at Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, at Al Dhafra Air Base in the UAE, and on rotating carrier decks that move through the region like clockwork. American fighters, tankers, reconnaissance aircraft, and surveillance drones operate in that airspace every single day. Iran watches all of it. Iran has its own fighters, its own radar networks, its own claims about where international airspace ends and where Iranian sovereign airspace begins. And Iran has a long history of testing those boundaries, not always by crossing them, sometimes just by pushing right up to the edge and seeing how the other side responds. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Air Force, the IRGC, operates independently from the regular Iranian Air Force. They are more aggressive, more politically motivated, and more willing to take risks that a conventional military pilot might consider outside accepted norms. They have intercepted American drones. They have buzzed American warships. They have approached American aircraft in ways that the Department of Defense has formally described as unsafe and unprofessional. So when we talk about an Iranian fighter being intercepted by an F-22 over the Gulf, we are not talking about a random encounter between two pilots who happen to be in the same patch of sky. We are talking about a moment inside a decades-long pattern of strategic pressure, positioning, and calculated risk-taking on both sides. Now let us talk about the aircraft involved. Because understanding what an F-22 Raptor actually is, what it can actually do, changes everything about how you understand this story. The F-22 Raptor entered service with the United States Air Force in December of 2005. It was designed from the very beginning to do one thing better than any aircraft in history: kill other aircraft before they ever know it is there. Every design decision, every engineering choice, every dollar of the roughly $143 million per aircraft price tag was made in service of that single goal: air supremacy through stealth, speed, and sensor fusion. Let us start with stealth, because stealth is the foundation of everything the F-22 does. When radar waves hit a conventional fighter jet, they bounce back to the radar receiver and reveal the aircraft's position, speed, and altitude. The F-22 is shaped and coated in a way that dramatically reduces the amount of radar energy that bounces back. Its angular surfaces, its internal weapons bays, its radar-absorbent material coating, all of these features combine to give the F-22 a radar cross-section roughly equivalent to a metal marble. A marble, an aircraft that is 62 feet long, weighing over 43,000 pounds fully loaded, shows up on enemy radar about the same size as a small bird. That is not a metaphor, that is engineering. Now combine that with speed. The F-22 can fly at speeds exceeding Mach 1.8, meaning faster than 1.8 times the speed of sound, approximately 1,200 miles per hour. But the truly remarkable capability is what the Air Force calls supercruise. The F-22 can sustain supersonic flight, meaning faster than the speed of sound, without using its afterburner. This is extraordinarily rare. Almost every other fighter jet in the world can go supersonic, but only by dumping raw fuel into the exhaust stream and burning it, a process called afterburning that produces enormous thrust but also enormous fuel consumption. The F-22 can cruise above Mach 1 for extended periods on military power alone. That means it can cover enormous distances at supersonic speed without burning through its fuel reserves, and it can do it without producing the massive heat signature that an afterburner creates. Then add the avionics. The F-22 carries an AN/APG-77 active electronically scanned array radar, one of the most advanced airborne radar systems ever built. It can track multiple targets simultaneously at ranges that exceed anything in the Iranian inventory. Its electronic warfare systems can detect, classify, and jam enemy radar and communications. Its data links allow it to share targeting information with other aircraft and ground stations in real time. The pilot sits inside a cockpit where sensors from across the aircraft are fused into a single comprehensive picture of the battlespace, displayed on advanced screens that tell him exactly where every threat is, exactly what it is doing, and exactly what his options are for dealing with it. The F-22 also carries weapons internally. This is crucial for stealth operations. External weapons pylons create radar reflection. The Raptor keeps its missiles, AIM-120 AMRAAM beyond visual range missiles and AIM-9X Sidewinder short-range heat-seeking missiles, inside internal bays that open only when it is time to fire. Until that moment, the aircraft's clean lines remain intact, and its radar signature stays minimal. Put all of that together and you have an aircraft that can find you before you find it, reach you before you can react to it, and engage you before you ever knew it was in the same airspace. That is not an overstatement. That is the design intent, and by all accounts, it works. Now let us talk about what the Iranian pilot was flying. Iran's Air Force is a complicated picture. After the 1979 Islamic Revolution, Iran lost access to American-made aircraft that the Shah had purchased in large numbers. The new government inherited a fleet of F-14 Tomcats, F-4 Phantoms, and F-5 Tigers, all American aircraft, all built with American parts, all requiring American support that was now unavailable. Decades of sanctions and isolation followed. Iran has spent those decades cannibalizing parts from one aircraft to fix another, developing a domestic maintenance capability where none existed, and occasionally acquiring foreign aircraft through unofficial channels. In recent years, Iran has operated Russian-supplied MiG-29 Fulcrums and Su-24 Fencer strike aircraft. The IRGC tends to operate older American-era aircraft that have been kept flying through remarkable improvisation and domestic modification. Iran has also been developing indigenous fighters, the HESA Kausar and the IAIO Azarakh, which are based on the F-5 airframe but with locally produced avionics and modifications. These aircraft are not in the same generation as the F-22, they are not even close. They carry radar systems that are significantly less capable, they lack supercruise, they lack stealth, and they lack the sensor fusion that makes the Raptor such a complete weapon system. This disparity in capability is the backdrop for every single intercept that takes place over the Persian Gulf. When an Iranian fighter and an F-22 occupy the same airspace, they are not competing on equal terms. They are operating at fundamentally different levels of technological sophistication. And the Iranian pilot almost certainly knows it. But knowing it and acting accordingly are two different things when you have a political mission to fly. So what actually happens during an intercept? Let us walk through it precisely because the details matter. Every intercept begins with detection. Before any aircraft gets close to another, radar systems and surveillance assets are tracking airspace continuously. The United States operates airborne warning and control aircraft, the E-3 Sentry AWACS, in the region. These are Boeing 707 airframes modified to carry a massive rotating radar dome on top that can track hundreds of aircraft simultaneously across vast distances. They maintain a continuous picture of everything flying in the region and relay that information to fighter pilots and command centers in real time. When an Iranian aircraft takes off from one of its bases along the Gulf Coast and begins moving in a direction that suggests it is approaching American assets, that movement is noted immediately. The AWACS crew logs it. The information goes to the strike package, meaning the American aircraft operating in the area. Decisions begin to be made. If the Iranian aircraft continues on a track that puts it on an intercept course with American assets, American fighters are directed to investigate. This is the intercept. The mission at this point is not to shoot anything. The mission is to identify, to establish visual contact, to communicate if communication is appropriate, and to make clear through presence and positioning that the approaching aircraft has been seen and tracked, and that American forces are present and prepared. The F-22's role in this sequence is unique. Because of its stealth, it can position itself in ways that a conventional fighter cannot. It can close to visual range, sometimes without the other aircraft knowing it is nearby. It can sit on a wing, appear suddenly in a pilot's field of view and create an immediate and visceral demonstration of the asymmetry and capability. You did not see me coming. I have been here for several minutes. Your radar has been looking at me and seeing nothing. That is the message, no words required. Former F-22 pilots who have spoken publicly about Gulf intercepts describe a specific experience. The Iranian pilot looks out of his cockpit and sees an F-22 sitting off his wing. What happens in that moment is entirely predictable. The Iranian pilot knows what the F-22 is. Every military pilot in the region knows what it is. Every military pilot in the region understands what that aircraft can do. And every military pilot in the region understands that if the pilot inside that Raptor had wanted to put a missile into his aircraft, the conversation would have happened differently. There would have been no warning. There would have been no wing position. There would have been a radio warning from the AWACS and then nothing. The fact that the F-22 is there, visible, sitting off the wing, is itself the communication. It says, "We see you, we tracked you long before you knew we were here, we chose to let you see us, and we are choosing to let you go home." That is air dominance in practice, not explosions, not dogfights, the credible, demonstrated ability to destroy held deliberately in check. Let us talk about rules of engagement because this is where the story gets complicated. And complicated is the right word. American military forces operating over the Persian Gulf operate under rules of engagement that are classified in their specifics but broadly understood in their intent. American aircraft have the right to self-defense. If an Iranian aircraft points weapons at an American aircraft, if it locks its fire control radar onto an American aircraft in what is called a weapons quality track, if it makes a hostile act or demonstrates hostile intent as defined in the rules, American pilots are authorized to respond. But those rules also reflect decades of understanding that in a region this tense, with stakes this high, a misunderstood signal or an overeager response can start a war that nobody actually wants. The goal is not to escalate. The goal is to deter. The goal is to demonstrate capability so clearly and so consistently that the other side concludes that aggression is not worth the cost. This is why the intercept is such a powerful tool. It delivers the message without pulling the trigger. It demonstrates the capability without exercising it. And it does so in a way that is visible to the Iranian pilot, visible to the Iranian command structure receiving his reports, and visible through diplomatic and intelligence channels to the Iranian government itself. There have been documented incidents over the Gulf where Iranian aircraft have approached American assets in ways that crossed into dangerous territory. In some of those cases, American pilots have lit up the Iranian aircraft with their own fire control radar, a move that in fighter pilot language means, "I have a lock, I can shoot. The next move is yours." In every documented case, the Iranian aircraft has broken off. It has turned away. It has gone back toward its base. Because the message was received and the Iranian pilot was not willing to find out what happened next. That restraint on the American side, that willingness to demonstrate capability without exercising it, is itself a form of strategic communication. And the F-22 is the ideal instrument for delivering that message because its capabilities are so overwhelming that the message carries maximum weight at minimum risk. Now let us talk about a specific incident that illustrates all of this in real terms. In September of 2022, the United States Air Force publicly acknowledged that F-22 Raptors assigned to the 95th Expeditionary Fighter Squadron operating out of Al Dhafra Air Base in the UAE had conducted intercepts of Iranian unmanned aerial vehicles, drones, operating over Syria. But the interaction that drew the most sustained attention from analysts was not over Syria. It was over the Gulf itself. where F-22s operating as part of a broader force protection mission came into contact with Iranian IRGC-AF fighters operating in what American commanders described as an unsafe and unprofessional manner relative to American assets in the area. The details that were made public were limited, as they always are in these situations. The military acknowledges the intercept happened. It confirms that the Iranian aircraft were escorted away from the American assets. It notes that the Iranian behavior was unsafe and unprofessional, and then it stops talking. What it does not say, but what every analyst who follows this region understands, is that the F-22 was invisible to the Iranians until the American pilots chose to make it visible. It does not say how long the Raptor had been tracking the Iranian aircraft before announcing its presence. It does not say how close the F-22 had come without being detected. It does not say what the Iranian pilot's face might have looked like when he turned his head and found a Raptor sitting off his wing at a distance close enough to see the pilot's visor. Those details stay classified, but their absence is itself informative. The Air Force does not need to say those things because the Iranian pilots already know them. They have been briefed. They have talked to their own intelligence people. They understand what happened, and understanding it is precisely the point. Let us take a step back from the specific incidents and look at the broader strategic picture. Because what is happening over the Persian Gulf between American F-22s and Iranian fighters is not just about individual pilots and individual intercepts. It is about the larger competition between two countries for influence, access, and credibility in one of the most contested regions on Earth. Iran's strategic calculation is complex. On one hand, Iran genuinely cannot match American air power in a direct confrontation. Iranian military planners know this. They have studied the Gulf War. They watched what happened to the Iraqi Air Force in 1991, one of the largest and most modern air forces in the Middle East at the time, which was essentially destroyed or rendered irrelevant within the first days of American operations. They know what happened to Serbian air defenses in 1999. They understand what American air power looks like when it is fully committed. They are not eager to find out firsthand. On the other hand, Iran has a domestic political audience. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps exists in part to project an image of defiant strength, sending fighters out to approach American assets, to probe the edges of American presence, to fly in ways that the United States publicly condemns as unsafe. This is a performance as much as it is a military maneuver. It says to the Iranian public and to the regional audience that Iran is not intimidated, that Iran pushes back, that Iran does not simply yield its sovereign airspace and its regional influence to American pressure. The F-22 intercept disrupts that performance without destroying it. When the Iranian fighter turns away from the Raptor, it can go home and report that it flew the mission, that it approached the area, that it was intercepted by superior force and chose not to escalate. That is not a shameful outcome for the Iranian pilot. It is a rational one, and it preserves the political narrative, we flew the mission, while avoiding the military catastrophe of actually engaging an F-22. This is the careful, controlled, dangerous dance that happens over the Gulf every week. Both sides are managing their risk. Both sides are sending messages. Both sides are conscious of audiences. And the F-22 is America's most powerful message because it is the most credible one. Now let us talk about the pilot inside the Raptor. Because behind all of the technology, behind all of the strategy, there is a human being making real-time decisions at 30,000 feet. F-22 pilots are among the most trained, most screened, most carefully selected aviators in the United States military. They begin their journey at undergraduate pilot training, a year-long program that washes out a significant percentage of candidates. From there, they move through advanced fighter training, learning the fundamentals of air combat maneuvering, learning to employ weapons systems, learning to fly in formation and at night and in weather. If they are selected for the F-22 program specifically, they then go through F-22 initial qualification training, which introduces them to the unique systems and capabilities of the Raptor. But the training that matters most for what happens over the Gulf is not technical. It is tactical and psychological. F-22 pilots train extensively in what the Air Force calls rules of engagement awareness and escalation management. They practice intercepts. They practice the precise positioning required to make the message clear without creating a collision risk. They practice communication, both radio communication with the other aircraft if appropriate and non-verbal communication through aircraft positioning and movement. They practice responding to provocative maneuvers without responding in ways that escalate the situation beyond what is warranted. And they practice decision-making under pressure. Because the moment an Iranian fighter does something unexpected, the F-22 pilot does not have time to call home and ask for guidance. He has to decide in real time whether what just happened crosses the threshold of hostile intent under his rules of engagement, whether it requires a response, and if so, what kind of response at what level of force. He has to make that call in seconds. And he has to make it correctly, because being wrong in one direction means potentially allowing harm to come to American assets, and being wrong in the other direction means potentially starting an international incident that his chain of command did not authorize and did not want. That is an enormous amount of responsibility to place on one person flying a single aircraft at supersonic speed over international waters. But it is also the defining reality of American air power in the modern era. The technology is extraordinary. The strategy is sophisticated. And in the end, it all comes down to a trained human being making a judgment call in real time with no time to think and everything at stake. Let us talk about what happens on the ground when one of these intercepts is complete. The F-22 pilot recovers back to base, either at Al Dafra or on the carrier deck if operating from a naval platform, and immediately enters what is called the debrief process. This is not a casual conversation over coffee. The debrief is a formal, structured analysis of every aspect of the flight. The pilot walks through the intercept from the initial detection to the final resolution. He reviews radar data, communication recordings, video captured by the aircraft's systems. He identifies what went exactly as planned and what deviated from the plan. He notes any Iranian behaviors that were unusual, any communication that was attempted, any maneuvering that suggested the Iranian pilot was considering a more aggressive course of action. That debrief information flows up the chain of command. It goes to the wing commander, to the air component commander, potentially to the combatant commander. If there were aspects of the intercept that involved the Iranian pilot taking actions that approached hostile intent, those details are flagged and analyzed carefully. Patterns are looked for. If Iranian fighters have been more aggressive over the past week, that tells the command something about what is happening inside the Iranian military and political establishment. If Iranian fighters have pulled back and been more cautious, that tells the command something different. The intercepts are intelligence collection as much as they are force protection. Every interaction with an Iranian aircraft gives American commanders information about Iranian tactics, about Iranian training, about Iranian confidence and Iranian intent. The F-22 pilot is not just protecting American assets when he flies that intercept. He is gathering data that informs American strategy across the entire region. There is a dimension to this story that rarely gets discussed in public forums, and it has to do with what the Iranians are learning from these encounters as well. Every time an Iranian fighter is intercepted by an F-22, the Iranian pilot goes home and writes a report too. He describes what he saw when the F-22 appeared, how it maneuvered, whether he got any radar return from it before visual contact, what the Raptor's positioning suggested about its prior knowledge of his flight path. Iranian intelligence analysts study those reports. They are building a picture of F-22 tactics over time. They are learning what they can about how the aircraft behaves in a real intercept situation rather than what they have read in open-source publications. This is why the F-22's classified performance parameters are so closely guarded. The moment the Iranians or any adversary understand precisely when the Raptor's stealth profile can be compromised, precisely what radar frequencies give the best chance of detecting it, precisely what maneuvers it prefers in an intercept scenario, those adversaries can begin to develop countermeasures. The asymmetry in capability begins to narrow, even if the gap remains enormous for the foreseeable future. This is the nature of modern military competition. It is not just about who has the best technology today. It is about how fast the other side can learn, adapt, and develop responses. And it is why American military planners are already working on the F-22's successor, the next-generation air dominance platform, which will take the principles that made the Raptor so effective and extend them into the next generation of threat environments. But let us come back to the Persian Gulf for a moment. Let us talk about the specific geography and the specific rules that govern it, because the legal framework of these intercepts is as important as the tactical one. International airspace over the Persian Gulf is governed by the same principles that govern international airspace everywhere. Specifically, the International Civil Aviation Organization's rules and the conventions of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea establish that the airspace above international waters is free for all nations to use. No nation owns the sky over the open ocean. American aircraft operating in international airspace have the same right to be there as Iranian aircraft operating in international airspace. Neither side can legally order the other to leave. Iran disputes some of this. Iran asserts that certain areas of the Gulf fall within its sovereign influence in ways that go beyond strict legal definitions. Iran has used this claimed influence to justify what it describes as defensive intercepts of foreign aircraft operating near its territory. The United States rejects these claims as inconsistent with international law and with the agreed principles of freedom of navigation and overflight that American military and diplomatic policy have defended for decades. This legal disagreement is not going to be resolved by any intercept over the Gulf, but it creates the political and rhetorical framework within which these encounters take place. When Iran intercepts an American asset, it frames the intercept as a defensive measure protecting Iranian sovereignty. When the United States intercepts an Iranian aircraft, it frames the intercept as a force protection measure, ensuring the safety of American assets operating lawfully in international airspace. Both framings are sincere, at least to the people making them, and both framings are accepted by different audiences. The Iranian public and the Iranian government's regional allies see Iranian intercepts as legitimate. The American public and America's regional allies see American intercepts as legitimate. The airspace above the Gulf is not just physically contested. It is contested narratively, and every intercept is a data point in a story that both sides are telling to their own audiences and to each other. What makes the F-22 so important in this context is that it is not just a fighter jet. It is a symbol. It represents the pinnacle of what American industrial and technological capacity can produce when directed at a single military mission. It is the most visible evidence of an asymmetry in air power that shapes every decision an Iranian military planner makes. The Iranians cannot match it. They know they cannot match it. The existence of the F-22 on station over the Gulf changes the risk calculus for every operation the IRGCAF considers. And that deterrent effect is worth more than any individual intercept. That deterrent effect is the whole point. Let us talk about some of the people who have been on the American side of these intercepts, because their stories bring this to life in ways that numbers and capabilities charts cannot. Former F-22 pilots who have operated over the Gulf describe the experience in terms that go beyond technical proficiency. One pilot, speaking in a public forum after his retirement, described the first time he appeared off the wing of a foreign military aircraft during an intercept. He said the reaction from the other pilot was immediate and unmistakable. The aircraft made a sharp turn, almost a flinch, before recovering and holding its position. The pilot had not seen the F-22 coming. He had no warning from his radar. One moment the sky beside him was empty, and the next moment there was a Raptor there, close enough to see clearly, settled into formation position as if it had always been there. That moment, the pilot said, is what the F-22 is designed to create. Not a fight, a demonstration, a wordless, undeniable proof of what the aircraft can do and what the pilot inside it chose not to do. Another former operator described the communication protocols that govern these encounters. American pilots typically attempt radio contact on the internationally monitored guard frequency, 121.5 MHz, before or during an intercept. The message is brief and professional. It identifies the approaching aircraft as operating in the vicinity of American military assets, advises it to change course or maintain safe separation, and indicates that American aircraft are present in the area. Often there is no response from the Iranian side. The Iranians monitor the frequency. They hear the call. They choose not to respond because responding would be an implicit acknowledgement of the American right to make the call in the first place. The non-response is itself a message. We hear you, we are not going to legitimize your authority in this airspace by answering you, but we are also turning around. This is the level of sophistication at which these interactions occur. It is not cowboys in the sky firing missiles at each other. It is professional military aviators, operating under explicit rules, delivering calibrated messages, making calculated decisions, and managing a delicate and dangerous situation with a level of skill and discipline that rarely gets the recognition it deserves. Let us talk about the broader consequences of these intercepts. What happens after the Iranian pilot lands and makes his report? What happens in the larger military and political system that those individual pilots are operating within? The Iranian military chain of command receives the report. At the command level, the IRGCAF leadership analyzes what happened. They consider whether the mission achieved its political objective, which is typically to demonstrate Iranian presence and resolve in the disputed airspace. They consider whether the American response was consistent with past American behavior or whether it indicated a change in posture or intent. They consider the operational security implications of having been detected and intercepted, potentially without knowing the F-22 was there until visual contact was made. At the political level, the Iranian government uses these incidents selectively. Incidents that can be framed as Iranian defiance and American aggression are publicized. Incidents that would reveal Iranian aircraft turning away from American fighters are not publicized. The information management is deliberate. The goal is to maintain the domestic narrative of a resolute Iran that pushes back against American pressure, without allowing the public to see clearly how overwhelmingly one-sided the actual military balance is. On the American side, the Intercept feeds into the ongoing intelligence picture of Iranian military readiness and intent. Analysts at the various intelligence agencies watch for changes in Iranian patterns of behavior over the Gulf. An increase in intercept attempts might signal increasing domestic political pressure on the IRGCAF leadership to be seen acting assertively. A decrease might signal a diplomatic signal or a period of strategic caution. Each data point adds to the picture. The command at U.S. Central Command, which oversees American military operations across the Middle East, uses this picture to make decisions about force posture. How many fighters to keep on alert? What mix of aircraft to maintain in the region? Whether to publicize intercepts or keep them quiet? Whether to raise the profile of F-22 operations in the region as a deterrent signal to Iranian leadership or to keep those operations below the public radar. All of these decisions ripple outward from a single intercept. From a single moment when an F-22 appeared off an Iranian wing and a message was delivered without a word being spoken. There is something else worth understanding about the F-22 in this context, something that goes beyond its raw capabilities. The Raptor has a psychological dimension that is almost as important as its technical one. Military deterrence works through belief. An adversary is deterred not just by what you can do but by their belief that you can do it, and their belief that you will do it if they cross the threshold. The F-22's reputation precedes it in every sense. Iranian military pilots have grown up in a culture that studies American air power carefully and warily. They have access to open-source information about the Raptor's capabilities. They have been briefed on its radar cross-section, its speed, its weapons systems, its combat record. They know that no F-22 has ever been shot down in its entire operational history. They know that no adversary aircraft has ever survived an engagement with an F-22 that the Raptor chose to make lethal. That knowledge creates a psychological environment in which the mere appearance of an F-22 carries enormous weight. The Iranian pilot who looks out of his cockpit and sees a Raptor sitting off his wing is not just seeing an aircraft. He is seeing the embodiment of every briefing he has ever received about American air power. He is seeing, in physical form, the reason that the IRGCAF has never shot down an American aircraft over the Persian Gulf despite decades of provocative encounters. He is seeing the answer to the question that every aggressive move toward American assets inevitably raises, and then what? Because the answer to that question, if an Iranian pilot or Iranian command structure ever followed through on the implied aggression of their intercept behavior, would involve F-22s. It would involve the full weight of American air power in the region. It would involve consequences that Iranian military planners have concluded they are not prepared to accept. The F-22 is not just a weapon. It is the most effective deterrent America has in the Persian Gulf precisely because every pilot and commander on the other side understands what it represents. Let us take a moment to appreciate the pilots themselves, both the American ones and, in a different way, the Iranian ones. The F-22 pilots who fly these intercept missions do not do it for recognition. The missions are classified, the details are not shared publicly, the names of the pilots are not released. These men and women wake up on a forward-deployed base in the Gulf. They fly missions over some of the most contested airspace on Earth. They make decisions with potentially enormous consequences, and then they come back to base and write their debrief reports and go to sleep and do it again the next day. They are professionals in the deepest sense of the word. Highly trained, disciplined, committed to a mission that they understand intellectually and believe in personally. The airspace over the Gulf is safer for American assets, for American sailors on the ships below, and for the broader stability of the region because of what they do every day without acknowledgement or applause. The Iranian pilots, and this is worth saying, are also professionals in their way. They are flying aging aircraft in politically charged conditions, under orders from a command structure that has its own pressures and its own calculations to manage. They are not crazy. They are not suicidal. They are trained military aviators executing politically motivated missions with an understanding of the limits of their own capabilities. The fact that these encounters have not escalated into lethal engagements is not just a result of American restraint. It is also a result of Iranian pilots making rational decisions about risk when they find themselves in an intercept with an aircraft they cannot match. That rationality is actually reassuring in a dark kind of way. The Persian Gulf has not exploded into open-air war not because the tensions are low but because the rational calculations on both sides have consistently produced the same outcome. The Iranians push. The Americans respond. The Iranians pull back. The status quo is maintained, and everyone goes home. Until the day someone miscalculates. Until the day political pressure overrides military judgment. Until the day an Iranian pilot makes a move that an F-22 pilot interprets, correctly or incorrectly, as crossing the hostile intent threshold. That day has not come, but every analyst who follows this region understands that the distance between the current situation and that day is not as large as anyone would like. This is the tension that lives inside every intercept mission. It is not just a demonstration of capability, it is a management of risk, and risk management, no matter how sophisticated the system, is never perfect. Let us talk about what the future looks like, because the F-22 is not going to patrol the Persian Gulf forever. The aircraft is aging. The Air Force has not produced new Raptors since 2011, when production ended at 187 aircraft after a political and budgetary decision that many Air Force officers and defense analysts consider one of the most consequential military procurement mistakes in recent American history. The original plan called for roughly 750 aircraft. The 187 that were actually built have to cover every American commitment that requires fifth-generation air superiority capability from the Pacific to Europe to the Middle East. That is a thin margin, and Iran knows it. Next-generation air dominance program is intended to produce a replacement for the F-22, likely in the 2030s. Whatever that aircraft turns out to be, it will carry forward the lessons of the Raptor and extend them into a new era of threats that include advanced integrated air defense systems, directed energy weapons, hypersonic missiles, and artificial intelligence-assisted targeting. The competition between American air power and potential adversaries never stops. It simply moves to the next generation of technology. But for now, in the airspace over the Persian Gulf today, the F-22 remains the decisive instrument. It is the aircraft that an Iranian pilot sees off his wing and makes a decision about. It is the aircraft that an Iranian command structure factors into every operational plan. It is the aircraft that represents, more viscerally than any diplomatic statement or strategic document, the reason that the Persian Gulf has not become the site of open-air war between Iran and the United States. A fighter jet does not have to fire a shot to change the course of events. Sometimes the most powerful thing it can do is simply be there. Simply appear off a wing in international airspace, sit in formation for a few minutes of loaded silence, and then watch the other aircraft turn for home. That is what happened. That is what keeps happening over the Persian Gulf every week, in airspace that never makes the news, in encounters that are never fully described to the public, in a competition for dominance that shapes the world we live in whether we know about it or not. And the F-22 is the reason the outcome keeps coming out the same way. The reason the Iranian fighter turns. The reason American assets continue to operate in that airspace without being touched. The reason the message gets delivered, received, and understood without a word being spoken. The pilot did not know what was flying beside him until it was already too late, and that is exactly how it was designed to work. Think about the men and women who fly those missions every single day, far from home, in classified airspace, doing a job that the country will never fully know about and carrying a responsibility that most people will never fully understand. If you have respect for those pilots and for what they do, type Raptor in the comments below. Let us see how many people actually made it to the end of this one. And if you learned something today, if this story gave you a better understanding of what American air power actually looks like in practice, not in a movie and not in a briefing room but in real airspace above a real gulf with real consequences, then hit the like button and subscribe so you never miss a story like this one. We have more of them coming and they are worth your time.